we we wound up being in the basement apartment with lived alongside of Chick Glazer, and Helen was her name. And as I recall, she had asthma quite bad, and but they were good people. So the next move from there, I'm going to check you out, Grayce, and see if you can remember where we went after we...
Was it Helen Glazer?
Yeah, and Chick.
Chick and Helen
But I'm going to check you out now. Where did we go after we left there? Where did we move to?
Went down to, on M Street.
Yeah, but whose place was it? Mrs. Clemens. All right. Okay, we stayed there for a little while. And then our next move
right next door to
was right next door. We moved. And can you remember the address was 662 M.
Who was it that owned it then?
Well, let's see, can't you tell me? It was brother and sister Weber. He was a shoemaker
house,
there.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there was three...
What was her first name? What was his name?
His name was George. I can't quite remember what her first name was. But they were very nice people, weren't they? Okay. So in that same apartment, it was a triplex, right? Can you remember who all lived in there?
One on each side and one in the back.
Yeah. Can you remember who they were that lived there?
Who was it that lived in the back and they had that kid? Who was it?
Was Clee or Melba Colford?
Cree Colford. Creel and Melba.
Yeah. And then, can't you remember Ruby and Fred Hill?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
They were on the side, weren't they? And then the Colfords in the back?
Yeah. So then, after a certain length of time, after we stayed there, then we bought the little place over on Avenue M. Can you remember that?
That sure looks like a pig hole.
Can you remember how much we paid for it?
$150
Yeah.
or something, wasn't it?
Well, it wasn't much, but we moved on over there, and we stayed there for quite a little while. In fact, we stayed there till we bought this house. So our two kids were over there with us, Barbara Jane, and Diane was born in 1940, so she spent some of her childhood there. Then Mort Wagner did a remodel job on it, and that cost us $1,000, but it wasn't too bad from there. So you go on and talk a little bit about it. Let's see what you can remember about the little M Street house.
Oh, I can remember when you went in the service, I was stuck down there by myself with those two kids.
That's right. But let's go back further now.
We had a backyard, and you planted it with something.
Yeah, we had a vegetable garden back there.
Did we have a cat or a dog? What was that thing that roamed around?
Well, we had a dog and we had a rabbit. Can you remember what the kids called a rabbit?
I don't know, what was it?
Sniffles, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So we stayed right there, and in the meantime, World War II was coming on, and here I was. And in the meantime, I'd left the government down there, the Bureau of Reclamation. I went over to the Bureau of Mines to establish myself as a journeyman electrician. Can you remember that? And can you remember what on December 7th, 1941, when the Japs bombed Pearl Harbor and you came over to tell me? That was a terrible thing. Okay, so then that left, I'd quit the government, like I say, and went out to the defense plant in Henderson. You remember that? And I purchased an old Packard from Miles Royer for $150, because back about that time you couldn't get gasoline or rubber on a car unless you were working with a defense plant. But I was able to get rubber on it and get gasoline, and I worked on out there until I went into the service.
That was out in Henderson, huh?
Yeah. And then after I'd got into the service, we sold the car. Clark Higgins interceded, and you sold the old Packard. You remember that? Okay, now you go on a little bit from there. I've gone into the service now, and I had to bid you goodbye.
It just wasn't easy to be there alone with two kids and that war on.
Okay.
You'd have to. Didn't they? What did they do about their windows? Did they?
Well, there was blackouts, I guess. Before then, air raid wardens coming around, and making sure your house was blacked out. But as you can recall, Edsel and your mother was awful good. He came down quite often, didn't he?
He happened to always bring me a bunch of food.
Yeah. So those were the days. It was a rough go, but we made it. Man, can you remember?
I wonder how long she was married to him. About, would you say?
To Edsel? Oh, quite a few years. I don't recall. But of course, he passed away before your mother did, as you well remember. Now, after I got out of the service, maybe you could remember, we had a 1941 Chevrolet that we bought new.
What color was it?
Black, can you remember? And you came over to Kingman, drove over there to pick me up. Can you remember that? Because the railroad connection was better out of...
I don't know how I even dared to do that.
On the Santa Fe rather than Union Pacific. So that's the way I came home. And you drove over and picked me up. Okay. Now, after we got home, why then, went through a little, just like falling out of an apple tree on your head. Took a little adjustment for me to get it going. I had to job hunt because I'd left the government. So, can you remember what I did? You can't, huh? Well, I played music in Las Vegas with Mike Werner. I had a little band. And then I also did some electrical work. So I was working both things, electrical and... but I mentioned you, if I ever got back with the government, I was going to stick black glue, right? And I did. Okay, why don't you say a little something about your early life here now, instead of me doing all the talking.
Well, it wasn't easy when you were in the service and I was down there by myself and those two kids.
But after I got out and everything, why, what all did you do?
Well, I was back of the kid at Barbara Jean in her school. She made a lot of good, what do I call them? When you get an A or a B.
Good grades?
Yeah, she made good grades. She was in a lot of things. Very pretty girl.
Okay, then you can remember when Diane was born. Now let's go into that.
Yeah, that was down in Vegas.
The old Las Vegas Hospital. Huh?
And that was Dr. McDaniel, wasn't it?
That's correct. And she was born what year?
Okay, 1940. What did he come in and tell me, Dr. McDaniel?
Well, he come in and told you that you just delivered a baby daughter. And you had a kind of a tough time, all right. It was a hard delivery.
He had to cut from...
Well, yeah. But they do that pretty much with all deliveries today. But anyway, on my asking him what we got, I said, did we get, what's the sex of the baby? He says, well, it saved you $10. Won't have to circumcise it. Okay, now go on a little bit with your life about Diane. And you recall one time, after she got about, she was an adorable little kid, and so was Barbara Jean. And can you remember when she thought she was playing piano on the edge of this little studio couch? She wanted to play piano. Can you remember that? And can you remember she was taking piano lessons from who? Can you remember?
Oh, what was her name? Mrs. who?
Mrs. Haley. And she'd go down there and practice on Mrs. Haley's piano. So then we decided that Diane really wanted to play piano, and I purchased a piano. Now, that was, we didn't have the piano when we were on M. Now, we moved in this house in what year? Can you remember that? It was 1948. And we purchased this piano from Jerry Davis. And in the meantime, I kind of had burned.
Diane's got it now, hasn't she?
Well,
or she gave it to to Barbara.
Barbara. It passed on down from Diane. after the kids got grown and everything, and they moved out of here, why, we had no need for the piano, so we gave it to Diane, right? And of course, right now, that little Wurlitzer piano.
Did we used to have it on that wall right there?
Yeah. Granddaughter Barbara's got it, right? Okay. Go on now and tell a little bit about your sorority and other things you belonged to and what you did this time.
I don't know. It was just we had nice friends in it, and we accomplished a lot. We went out on, what did we do to raise that money or sell things? What was that in the war?
Well, you well can remember, can't you, that you belonged to sorority, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, can you remember that? A number of years you stayed with that sorority.
But we went out and sold, what were those bonds, or what was it?
Savings bonds.
Did we do that?
Yes, a lot of little things like that. Then you were elected as president of the American Legion Auxiliary. Can you remember that? Okay.
And then I used to go up to Girls State all the time up in
That's right.
Carson City.
You were active in Girls State. You were in it about
the
how
one
many
that
years?
got that gal, it's the, what's her name?
Frankie Sue?
She would keep telling me that she didn't know she ought to go against this one or that one. I said, don't let anybody, I put up my fist like that, anybody ever put you down. Go for it, Frankie.
And Frankie has done very well today, huh? In our politics in the state of Nevada. So let's
see. She was up at Girls State and she'd get upset because she didn't, I'm running again, I don't think I can win. She'd have a tear in her eye.
But you went up to Girls State for quite a number of years. I would just take a guess offhanded. At least 8 or 9 years. And you,
with the bus and
yeah,
chaperoned all those
you
kids.
chaperoned all those kids. So that was quite a little important part you played. So we've been active in the community, and let's tell about this Dime a Dip dinners that you took over at the church.
How many years was I in that?
Well, about at least 18, 19 years. Now I'll tell you what it was all about first. Our church over here had to come up with so much money. We were assessed so much money to help Kingman build an LDS church over there. So Jerry and Norma Springer originated this Dime a Dip, and so you carried it on there. Now let's tell a little bit about it, what all you did with it.
Well, I had to pick out all of the gals in the church that was going to serve back in the Dime a Dip, and each one would have, there's so many, all the women would have to furnish something, and they'd put it on these big long tables out at the back of the church, right there on the back wall, and then people would come and buy it.
Well, not only did you arrange for all the servers and everything, but you wrote all the publicity. Can you remember that? Okay, it was very successful, and it was carried on for quite a number of years. And then after the wards were split, why you'd contact members from the other wards to stand in the serving line.
Who was that guy that went to them that didn't belong to the church?
Well, there was quite a patronage over there of people that didn't
What was
belong.
that one that didn't belong? Did you
Well,
remember him?
yeah,
What was his name?
Dr. Dill.
Yeah.
He and his wife, they enjoyed coming over to church for those diamond dip dinners, and it was well patronized by people outside of the church.
And I did the publicity on it.
That's right, because it was a good meal, and even after a while, it always maintained the name Diamond Dip, but they had to raise the price a little bit on certain commodities, right? Do you remember that? Because, things were getting more expensive as things went along. All right. So now...
Do you want to get me one of those yellow pills in there? Is that the allergy pill?
You just had an allergy pill a little while ago. I gave you one.
All right.
So let's see. Let's stop this thing and see what's happened here. Well, today happens to be March the 14th. Diane, on talking to her, thought it might be a good idea if I could tell a little bit about Mama's life. She wasn't one that I could get too interested, get her talking. But anyway, what you've heard of her prior to me taking on this time goes back maybe a few years. Oh, I'm going to say about 4 or 5 years, and I tried to engage her into some conversation that you have already heard on the first part of this tape. But I just couldn't get her going. And it was plain to see right there that her Alzheimer's was setting in pretty good. So I regret that way back through the years I couldn't get her going where we could have, had a lot of things said about Mama. She was truly a delightful person in her younger years, and I'm sure she could have told us a lot. But anyway, I'm going to go back as I remember things, when I first met her. And of course, you've heard the story about taking the soda water off the bandstand and drinking it. And right about there, maybe a little romance started to grow. Because it wasn't long after that on seeing her at another dance, she asked of me if I'd like to come up to her house. They were going to have a party of some kind. So I obliged, and I went on up there, and maybe they had some sandwiches or something, just a bunch of younger people together. And so maybe right about there I got even a little more acquainted with her and there was something about her that appealed to me. So I could say right about there maybe a romance was started. And I spent considerable time up there at her house, and oftentimes Nell Malachi, whom I was staying with, Ralph, at that particular time. My folks had gone to San Diego, and I was boarding and rooming with Ralph and Nell, and of course playing in the band. Nell would call up there and say, if Grayce would answer the phone, hey, get that Tommy headed in this direction. Supper's about ready to be served. So I'd take off and go. But life for Grayce really wasn't easy in those younger years that I recall. Her taking care of her grandmother pretty much. And her grandmother was quite demanding of things that she wanted done. That old wood stove in the kitchen, Grayce would have to fire it up and put on some water for Grandma's tea. Grandma, being typical English, consumed quite a bit of tea. And so that was a strain on Grayce, having to do all that and maybe prepare her own meals the best she could. She was pretty much on her own. Her mother was a telephone operator, and I don't know, I think maybe a lot of the credit to raising Grayce after the divorce and they moved to Payson. Why, pretty much up to her grandmother, who took over. And I commend her she was a good woman. I enjoyed doing little things for her that maybe needed done. I recall as through her getting up into the little store that she had on the corner of her lot there, a miniature 7-Eleven, so to speak, that it was quite a struggle for her to get up into that store. A little stair was established, and it kind of fell apart. So I took over from there, and I built a better stairway for her so that she could get up there. And she appreciated little things like that. When I first started going with Grayce, she looked into my background. I guess, playing with Ralph Malachi in the Chicago Hotel Orchestra, she may have had ill thoughts of me. But on checking, on checking me out, she found out that I'd come out of a good family and a good background, so to speak, and I was morally clean. So she took a liking to me. And like I said again, it was a pleasure to do little things for her that needed to be done around the house. Now Grayce, her favorite color throughout her life has been pretty much green. Any piece of material or anything else, if it was green, that appealed to her. And I recall in this little adobe house, now there was a little kitchen where Grandma spent her time, keep warm in the winter time and fire up that old wood stove. Why, Grayce had, she slept in the house itself. And so a lot depended on Grayce fixing maybe something to eat for her grandmother and maybe pinch hitting in the store now and then. So I admire Grayce for all that she did. It wasn't an easy life for her. And the winters were pretty tough there. And from what I gathered talking to her and learning from her, that walking up to the high school, up through the canyon there, snow on the ground and so forth, and getting to school, that was quite a little problem for her. And she had a very lifelong good friend there that she teamed up with, Thea Bale. And they remained real good friends. So I recall Grayce's some furniture in that little old house. She got a hold of some green paint and painted everything she could put her hands on green. Oh, just a horrible green color. But she liked it, and so I had to go along with it. Well, as our romance started, but even a little more, I recall Ralph, he loved to trout fish. And we went over on the Duchesne River one afternoon and to spend the night over there and fish the stream. Why, he and Nell said, well, why don't you ask Grayce if she'd like to go, and she'd be welcome to come with us, And of course, they could make a bed for Grayce where she could be by herself, and myself in a sleeping bag or whatever it was. So anyway, we had a good time, and we Nell was a good cook. She cooked chicken over there, and I don't know how long. Ralph and I caught a few fish, and I guess Grayce and Nell, they carried on a lot of conversation. And I think Grayce, about that time, she was kind of infatuated with me. I think she truly liked me. She had a boyfriend by the name of Perry Larson prior to me coming onto the scene. He was much older than Grayce, and I couldn't see that match at all with her. But Grayce was morally clean, and I fell for it pretty good. So it wasn't too much later on after that, it was graduation time in high school for Grayce. And so I recall she had the lead in an operetta. The name of the operetta was Pickles. Now wait a minute, I beg your pardon, I'm getting carried away. Oh, what the heck was it? HMS Pinafore. That's what it was. It was an English cast, and the lead man playing opposite Grayce. Grayce had the role of Josephine. Now she had a good singing voice, and Maurice Jones, he was the leading man. Well, I don't know, Grayce was funny. She supposedly had to kiss him in one scene there, and she wasn't one to take to somebody that she didn't like to kiss. But anyway, she made it through. Her father was one who never came on the scene. I only met him at one time. But as I remember, I think he did come through with the price for Grayce to purchase a pretty yellow dress for this occasion. And whether he saw the HMS Pinafore, I don't know. But I surely did, and I enjoyed it. And I was proud of Grayce, real proud of her. So right about there, the love bucket bit us both pretty good. And my folks had gone on to San Diego, and prior to that, and as I mentioned, I'm living with Ralph and Nell. And Ralph is booking jobs throughout the state. We played all over the state of Utah, one-night stands here and there. Junior proms in Gunnison, Salina, Redmond, Redmondo, Richfield, you name it. Clear on up as far as Brigham City, Park City. We played all kinds of engagements. It was a good band Ralph had. We were just a bunch of young kids, but he called his band Ralph Malachi and his Chicago Hotel Orchestra. So that probably set pretty good with the public. They thought, well, gee, this is a band out of Chicago. But all it was Ralph, who had played in Chicago with some of the show bands back there, and he came to Price, Utah, where he was born and raised, to put a band together. So the band was more or less just a bunch of high school kids, but we were well rehearsed, and we went over very well with the public. And that was a dancing era. They even had open air dance halls. And lots of times maybe they'd get the season started a little bit too early as to the open air dancing, and it'd be cold. They'd have a big old oil barrel in the middle of the concrete cement floor and fire it all up to where the dancers could stop by as they danced by and warm up a little bit, I guess. So, like I said, the romance was getting a little bit thick with Grayce about then, and I think that Perry was definitely cut out of the picture now. She had eyes for nobody but me. So, anyway, for some reason, I guess, we were just madly in love. Grayce 18 and me just barely 19. And we decided we're going to get married. Maybe Ralph and Nell might have put the help in with us a little bit because they knew we were in love. So they drove us to Heber City, where the marriage was performed by the county clerk there in Heber City. Now, I wasn't old enough to be married because I think maybe Ralph had to sign for me as a custodian or whatever. And Grayce, of course, at the age of 18, she was old enough. So we had a nice wedding ceremony, and back we went to Price. I beg your pardon. Back we went to Payson. That's where Ralph was booking out of Payson at that time with his band. And so we spent our wedding night at Ralph's house, and how well I remember that. They put salt in the bed. Oh, doggone it, and I guess everybody had an ear towards the bedroom to see if there was any action taking place back there. Well, I'm about right out of tape on this side, so I'm going to let it run on out, and then I'll resume on the other side. So I hope you like what I have to say. I'm trying to say a lot about Grayce, more so than myself.